Somebody a cup of coffee here?
There's coffee in the other room, Richard.
Oh, I was just messing with my.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. And everyone, welcome to the November meeting of the Savannah-Chatham County Public School Audit Committee. I will call the meeting to order, and I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Also move.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the agenda for the November 21st, 2024 Audit Committee meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. The next item is the approval of the minutes from our October meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes? Are there any notes, additions, or corrections? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
I didn't make it, so I'll abstain.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from our October 24th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. The next item of business is the audits. We'll start with 4.01, the East Blast audit. Leah?
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to just reflect to you, this is not the work that the internal audit does, but we hire an external auditor based on state law to review our expenditures of East Blast funds. The company that we work with is Serrata Maddox Evans and Company CPAs. On October 16th, 2024, they issued an independent accountant's report that said, in our opinion, the Savannah-Chatham County Public School System complied in all material respects with Article 8, Section 6, Paragraph 4 of the Georgia Constitution and Official Code of Georgia regarding expenditure of sales tax for educational purposes during the year ended June 30th, 2024. So at this point, we just share this information to you and pass that through you, as this is how it's designed in our audit committee charter. And it needs to have an approval to move forward, but also discussion can be brought up if needed.
Are there any questions or comments about the external audit report on East Blast? Mr. Moss?
Yes, so when do we put out the RFP for this audit?
I will lean to management for that
Thank you.
discussion.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The RFP that was done was for a 3-year period, and we're entering our last year, so we will be doing that next year.
Do we have that on the procurement calendar yet, or?
I would have to check with our purchasing department because they kind of give us a headway looking at the calendars.
So our contract with them goes through the next East Boss?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, not, you mean
Next year.
the next year,
Next
not next
year.
East Bloss.
Got it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments?
No, none for me.
Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the audit as submitted.
So moved.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the independent audit accountant's report on the East Blast. All in favor?
Aye.
The report is adopted. Leah?
The next item is the summary report of the business process reviews. This is that yearly review that we conduct at the school sites. I wanted to highlight this year kind of what type of report, because last year we had some questions concerning this report. Typically what we bring to you is performance audits, but in these cases, these are compliance reports to the individual schools. This is just a summary report out of those individual business process reviews that we conduct at the school sites. Our scope last year was from July 1st of 2023 through April 30th of 2024. With the exception of our nurses and our school nutrition, we do that in real time of the inventory and as well as the activities that are conducted within the fiscal year. Last year, we did 20 reviews, and that included both the follow-ups as well as new principals. And as you can see in point 2, business process reviews are conducted when a new principal starts at a school. 4 years from the time of the last review, when a follow-up is required due to a previous report with a high error rate, or if a principal requests us to come in. These reviews are compliance checks into limited and very general documentation and financial controls. This is not an in-depth review. It's just a snapshot for our principals so that they know what their front office staff, as well as their information specialists and nurses are doing within their school sites. These reviews are compliance audits and not performance audits, and what I want to point out is the key difference between performance audits. Performance and compliance audits is that performance audits reflect the effectiveness and efficiency of a program, whereas compliance audit reviews are really just designed to identify adherence to the rule. So before I move on, do we have any questions? Okay. So for this area, I wanted to break down really what do we look in each area. Like I said, very limited, very general controls. So when you look into the accounts payable error rate, which you can see that on page 5, when we looked at the accounts payable area, we reviewed the supporting documentation and the timing of of entering the receiver into the Munis financial system. Why the timing is important? Because that timing impacts the timing for payment that is triggered. Once that receiver is received in the system, it triggers AP to make that payment once the invoice and everything matches. We also identified or reviewed the account coding of items purchased. That's making sure that they are expended correctly in the correct account line to reduce budget transfers or misrepresentation of school budgets. Student activity funds, again, general documentation and financial controls. We reviewed the supporting documentation for the collected funds and also the disbursement of funds. We look at the timing of the receipt of funds into the school, student activity funds accounting system, as well as adherence to the accounting charter to make sure they're expending and collecting funds as the charter was initially designed. Under purchase cards, we look for adherence to the account coding, again, going back to those budget lines, and then also the reconciliation timing. For leave forms, this is new this year. And in this area, we look at the adherence to board policy for leave time. We also looked at leave form matching information in the timekeeping system. For student data, this is the information specialist, so we've moved from the secretary and the bookkeeper, and now the student data piece is conducted by the information specialist. The timing from the date of the incident to documenting the incident within PowerSchool, that's supposed to be done within 48 hours. Now, that might not always be the information specialist. Some, they could hold the information before entering it, but sometimes it can also be because of the administrator investigating the situation. So the goal is that it's done within 48 hours. And also the reporting of the correct attendance code. And what we mean by that is, say, for instance, OSS or ISS is given. So when you go into their PowerSchool, it shouldn't be marked just absent. There's another code that designates it was OSS or ISS. Okay, so we look at that as well. In the nurse section, we look at completion of required documentation. That includes the documentation that reflects the administration of medication that says, as a parent, I'm bringing this medication on site, and this is how it's supposed to be administered, and the timing and all that kind of stuff. So that is looked at, as well as the accuracy of the daily counts, because nurses are supposed to document, how much of the medicine they received, and then the daily output of that. So we look at that. And then, of course, school nutrition, we look at the accuracy of those inventory counts for their food inventory. Do we have any questions?
Student data? One of the things on here was, I'm sorry, and maybe you did cover it.
What? Go ahead.
Student data?
Yeah, so with the student data, we look at the.
I'm sorry, I'm,
Okay.
keep going.
All right. It's that information specialist.
What determined whether or not an area was tested or not tested?
Okay, so those that said not tested, most of those are follow-up. So remember, last year we talked about the 20%, if we would go back. And so that was what we did last year. Now, this year we took your suggestion with taking the average of what you see here, and then anything above that we're going to go back to. So if it says not tested, then that was because they met that low error rate last year, so we didn't have to look at it. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I just have one. Johnson just kind of jumps off the page. With some pretty big error rates. I know that is someone here that can talk about Johnson's report. But, I mean, we've got 1/3 of our student activity funds are bad, 1/4 of our leave forms are bad, 1/4 of our student data is bad, half of our nursing is bad, and 1/3 of our school nutrition is bad, or not meeting the standard. I won't say bad, but that just jumps out at the page. Was there any specifics identified there?
So under the purchasing and accounts payable, the highest error rate that we saw underneath that is that the signature and date was not on the purchase order. And if I do believe correctly, Shauna, was there a current change in a secretary at that point as well?
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe so. There were.
Some changes in the secretaries. So that could have been just a learning thing as well. However, that was the highest thing. And so, again, with Johnson, it was a new principal. So hopefully these will be corrected next year. With student activity funds, the key thing was that the 5 entries into school cash net were not dated the same day as report of monies collected form. So that was the biggest issue there. And then the other 15 disbursements, and that's the highest rate on that one, is that they didn't follow the student activity fund guidelines in that area. So as you can see with management's response in those areas, these are the things that they're going to work on to make sure these items are not repeated. With purchase cards, sometimes when our samples are a little lower than the full sample that we can pull, sometimes these percentages are a little higher. And I think that's the case in purchase cards, because of the 13, there was one area where there was only 1 month when an item wasn't reconciled. And then 3 transactions, it wasn't coded correctly. That previous issue with it was supposed to go to a non-supply account and went to a supply account. With leave forms, the findings here with leave forms is kind of consistent across. This was the first time looking at it, so I wouldn't hit so much on the leave forms because this is where we're looking systematically, where these errors that we're finding. It's more of kind of trying to identify the landscape at this point. These 2 key findings in this area were common among all sites, so this will be uplifted to management from a systematic standpoint as to how we got here and where we can support the schools moving forward. And that would include that the leave transactions on the forms didn't always match what was in Chronos, or that there were forms that didn't even exist, but there was time in Chronos. The student data piece, the key finding there is that they were not entered within 48 hours. Again, part of that process could be the impact of the administrator, not necessarily the IS, but the administrator not doing the investigation, or the investigation could potentially have taken a while because there may have been multiple students. But there were 9 of them, so it's really hard to say that they weren't done within 48 hours. With the nurse, I did speak with Nurse Wilson, and there was a sub at Johnson, so there was a training issue there, and she will address that. With school nutrition, 4 of the inventory items reviewed did not match the quantity listed on the inventory on hand report, and 5 were not even on the inventory on hand report. So we've uplifted that also to the director of school nutrition, and she will be adjusting that and doing a inventory count immediately.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Ron.
Welcome.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I do know on here that some of these numbers are higher than what we want to be seeing, like the 21% of purchase cards at Islands. However, when you actually look in the report, it's nice to see that number's gone down.
Yes.
But what is concerning is over at New Hampshire K8, where the previous time you looked at the purchase cards, it was at 21%, and now it's up at a 67%. Is that because of the small sample size, or is there something else? Can y'all figure if there's anything else going on over there with that? Because that's over a 40% jump.
That could be the impact. Like I said, sometimes that small sample size can make it look bigger than it was when you look from year to year. Hempstead High. Yeah, we only had one purchase card
Okay.
that we looked at. So yeah, very much so.
I just wanted to make sure there's, if something else is not
Yeah,
really
I didn't
going
want
on.
to speak without looking at it because I remember there was one school where we only had one transaction.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
A couple of things. Last year, when we looked at the nursing audit, one of the things that was suggested was that we go to more electronic way of account, as opposed to the,
The paper
writ-
form.
paper forms. What happened?
Yes, good morning. I need to follow up with that, Mr. Moss. I'm not sure. I know we looked into that. I'm not sure what actually happened, but I'll follow up on that.
Okay. And I'm glad you're here, Mr. Ray. Training. These assistant principals, information specialists, whatever, what is the additional training that they're receiving to make sure that these things are adhered to?
Well, I know one of the discussions that we have with them within the 48-hour is, the importance of not just the information specialist entering it, but also the timing of the investigation. And I would say before we even approach the training, the conversation could be had with Derek and his team Derek Butler and his team is to address the concern for, is the 48-hour the right time? Because some of these discipline may take longer than 48 hours because they're trying to get a whole, if there's multiple students, trying to interview the multiple students, finding the timing to, do that, as well as communicate with the parents. So it may not be the best time. So I would say the first approach is really, let's look at the landscape and is that 48 hours the appropriate time? Because it's not state-driven for that piece. It's more of a common, a best practice.
Okay, so my question about training is not just student data.
Oh, okay.
It's just in general. I mean, as, especially the financial piece, how much training are these people getting on the financial side?
Are you talking student activities or just everything in
Student
general?
activities, purchase cards, inventory, all of that.
Okay. There's ongoing training all year. At the beginning of the school year, finance has had for the past couple of years, we have what we call a finance workshop where we invite all administrators, all secretaries, anyone that has anything to do with anything financial to come out. And we have a 4-hour training. We have 4 sessions of those where everyone can come in. All of the directors from finance is there to give an overview and answer questions, and there's some training at that time. We also have set up quarterly training classes available to anyone who needs it, that they can just reach out to us, and they're on the calendar. So if they reach out and say they need some additional training, we have those automatically set up. And we've made available to everyone a financial handbook that, for the finance division, that has everyone's telephone numbers. Every school department has been assigned a specific person for each one of our departments. That's their contact in those different departments. So if they need any additional trainings, they're welcome to call those folks, and we can go out to them and have one-on-one training when requested. So training is constantly available for anyone who wants it from finance.
So if there's attrition, is there onboard training that's specific for these tasks as they come, as the new people come on board that might fill a role?
There is, when someone new comes into the district, before they can have access electronically to our platforms, they have to go through a training. So they have that as the initial first introduction to the school district's platforms. So they have that at the beginning. And then, say, for example, the secretaries with the student activity funds, we have an accountant in the accounting department that's responsible for those services. And she can go out to the schools and meet with them one-on-one when requested.
So my question might involve a little bit of training, and maybe you can answer, maybe you can't. But on, let's just say whoever's job it was to do wasn't, whoever's job it was to mark whatever form or report whatever information went on there, who didn't do it, are there any repercussions? Like, is it, hey, we got flagged and here's the deficiency and we tracked it down to this is this information specialist job, so therefore we're going to designate this person needs X amount of training? Or is it just kind of like a general overview of, yeah, we missed that, and so the whole department needs to do additional training? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
It does, and it is available. Say, for example, the student activity funds, those funds are reconciled on a monthly basis and sent to the accounting department. It is the job of the staff accountant that's responsible for student activities to review the activity, to look at the reconcilements, and if she sees that there's consistently some type of problem, or if they're late with those types of things, she may go out and do an audit of that particular site. Comes back, gives us a review of what she has found, and if there's some additional training needed at that time, we inform the principals.
So a follow-up on that, it's kind of, I don't know if it's because it's early or whatever, but it kind of sounds like, yes, there's training available and they can ask for it, but at the same time, it doesn't sound like unless they're being onboarded that it's mandatory, even if the errors get to a certain level. Is that correct?
No. Once we identify that there's a problem, we get with them on those.
Okay, so the training is basically mandatory once you find a certain amount of errors consistently?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we do have some online, like 3 to 5 minute classes that they can go on, and if we see that they have a problem with any one particular area, it's called Kev University. So on that platform, there are 2 to 5 minute session trainings that they can just pull up and go through, and if that's not sufficient for them, then as I said, the accountant is available to go out and sit one-on-one with them. And we also have the secretary in our finance division that we're fortunate enough to have her, where she has worked as a secretary out in the schools. So she's got some good training for us from that aspect. So there are times when we send her out with the accountant to work one-on-one with them.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah. And pardon this may sound like a crazy question. So in their training, so to get to the next level of training, is there any testing or anything that they have to pass? Or can they just check off, I took the training?
There is no testing or anything at this time with the training. The training is just us looking at the next month's reports and seeing if there's any improvement. And if not, then we continue to just talk with them. Now, I can say to you that we have had here recently where I've got a call or email from a principal where apparently they saw that they had an issue in that area, so they made a switch in personnel with doing the work. So that has happened. If we see that we've got someone responsible for their financials and is really not getting it, there's been some switching of personnel in some respects.
So I'm sorry, I've got a zillion questions this morning. When we are hiring school secretaries who are responsible for this, are we making sure that they, and this is not an insult, that they have financial aptitude?
Now, that will have to be an HR question.
Good morning. There's not really a assessment that is given to any new hire. I can say that as we've had these audit committees over time, we used to have a old antiquated system that we just moved. We just moved to new Munis 2 years ago. Our struggle with secretaries used to be they would learn in a GUI interface that was Windows. We would try to train them in a DOS-based system from the 1990s. With the new Munis system, at least we have that closer connection to what they're learning or what they get in industry. But we're not, but there really isn't an assessment. It's more about their skill set, their background, where they've worked before. Those type things are what we are looking at when we're looking to hire secretaries.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an error rate at which, or a flag that would trigger a further audit in these areas? Maybe that's
Okay.
Like I said, in previous years, we did the 20% or above, but you made the recommendation last year. So moving forward with this, we'll take the average of these findings and then go back. And as a matter of fact, because of that, instead of the typical 19, we will be looking at 29 next year,
okay,
based on the follow-up rates.
right. So you're saying at that point, there would be an additional, maybe more full audit of these areas?
The areas with the higher rate. Or so when you say a full audit, are you speaking in particular to the area and not necessarily the school? Is that what you're,
Correct.
okay.
Yes, yeah.
So yes, right now we're watching the leave form error rate at this point. This is our first year. We do kind of want to watch it for another year to see systematically. That has happened before in the past with, as a matter of fact, in next calendar year, you'll see a purchase card. Because of the previous years that we've had finding in these, we now have a purchase card audit. When was the last one? Probably about 5 years ago, we did a district-wide student activity fund, looking at, from a more systematic viewpoint. So yes, that does get triggered. Student data, we tip in the discipline area. For those who are seasoned, we typically look at that every 5 years anyways from a more global standpoint because there's so many components to that. So yes, there is usually a wider audit that's done beyond just these general controls if we continue see a continued pattern.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Obviously, again, just it's a snapshot for management. It gives you some data points to address and look after. We don't adopt this one, or we do?
We do.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the report as submitted.
So moved.
I'll second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adopt the audit of business process reviews. All in favor?
Aye.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Shauna Chapman, and I will be presenting the report for the inventory of transportation parts. Okay. So for this audit, we had three objectives. The first one was to determine procedures for transportation inventory parts. The second one was to conduct a physical inventory count to determine if inventory records reflect the inventory on hand. And the third was to evaluate the effectiveness of inventory tracking and the safeguarding of inventory. Okay, and I'll just go and explain how this audit was initiated and just some background on the Transportation Department. The inventory audit of transportation parts was initiated at the request of the Finance Department in fiscal year 2023. The Transportation Inventory Department within the district is responsible for managing and overseeing inventory parts for the yellow transportation fleet. The Finance Department does support the Transportation Department, and currently the Finance Department does not have a ledger for the transportation parts inventory. Okay, and then a summary of results. We performed the inventory audit of transportation parts to evaluate the risks associated with the physical inventory management and compliance. Based on our information that we reviewed over the course of this audit, the internal department has determined an overall rating of the audit as unsatisfactory, with risks identified in the following areas: procedures, financial controls, and inventory controls. Okay, so the first observation was procedures. During interviews with management, the management provided inconsistent answers regarding procedures when we asked about the procedures for the department. The Transportation Department currently do not have any written procedures, and our recommendation for the procedures and processing procedures is to develop written procedures to define the department's processes and guidelines. This should include guidelines for operational reporting and communication processes, and there should also be training conducted for all staff on the new standardized procedures, and there should be staff meetings that should be held to provide updates or changes to these procedures. So management response was they would develop a detailed standardized operating procedures outlining each process involved in the inventory management. The person that will be responsible for this is the operations inventory manager, and the first draft should be provided by February 2025, and the final copy should be done by April 2025.
I think I'm going to go a little out of order, and we'll just discuss each finding as we go.
Oh, okay, good.
So I'll open it up for comments. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Was there any explanation of why they don't have the written procedures after transportation has been in-house for 8 years?
No, I've been handed over to management.
Good morning. So unfortunately, I cannot explain why we don't have written procedures. All I
Real
can
quick, ma'am, can you just introduce yourself?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Good morning. I'm Megan Davidson. I'm the Chief Operations Officer, and transportation falls up under my purview. So unfortunately, I'm new to the district. I came in September, so I can't explain why we don't have written procedures. Those are something that we definitely should have. Our executive director joined us last October, and then Mr. English is he falls up under them. I apologize, I can't remember his exact title, but he's the one who is responsible. I think he's like a senior director who is responsible of overseeing inventory. And he's new, he joined in April, I believe. So we have relatively new staff and leadership in this area, but we recognize this is a very important control, and we are working to put this in place immediately. I don't know why historically we don't have them. Maybe we did, and they went away with as the transition, but we will put them in place immediately.
Thank you.
What is the total budget for this department?
More than 30 million is what I'm being told.
Okay, so large financial risk. Yeah. I'd say. Okay.
Just to clarify that number, I mean, it's, the Transportation Department as a whole has increased as a budgetary expenditure for the district. Now, to be specific, how much of this is dedicated toward inventory of parts? I don't know that number, and we'd have to extract that. So I don't want anybody to walk out of this room and think $30 million is going toward inventory of parts, because it's not. You've got workforce there that we're paying, you've got fuel, you've got buses. Yeah, the whole thing is 30+ million. I believe it may be upwards around 35 million at this point. So just point of clarity.
And
but
Shauna,
My question
Go
was to
ahead.
drill down to
Yeah.
that specific number is why I asked that. Yes, thank you.
right, and Shauna would share some more information in the other observations.
That's what I was gonna say. It looks like observation 2 is gonna
Yes. it will
address the
help.
reason we can't drill down any further.
Yes.
So my question becomes, if we don't have written procedures, what sort of training are we offering anybody that's hired in the inventory parts department?
So we currently have a manager in that area and then a parts clerk is my understanding. They've been in place for, I believe, several years. I can't speak to what training they've had. I can tell you what training they're going to go through, and the fact that we're now going through financial training based on this review has brought to light the understanding that we need to go over foundational principles of finance, like what is the blanket PO and why does that have risk? And then why do we need to have good inventory controls? I don't want to assume anybody had any training, so we're starting at a very elementary level. And then we're also digging in, as you'll see in the management response, into the system itself to make sure that we set aside appropriate controls in the system. So we have good controls when it comes to the software, so that somebody can't go in and make any adjustments in the software, and good controls on the physical inventory, because it takes both pieces to have a good mitigation of the risk.
And you, just so I'm clear, you said you just got here in September?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other comments? I would just close with, this says March of 2025 or April of 2025. I'm much more comfortable with your word immediately. I mean, these are taxpayer dollars that are unaccounted for. And whether it's 35 million or 2 million, it shouldn't matter, in my opinion. So we'll go on to number 2.
Okay, number 2 was insufficient financial controls. The Transportation Department has insufficient financial controls over the ordering and process of parts and monitoring of costs. Okay, we reviewed 8 vendors that the Transportation Department used for blanket PO orders, which is Yancey, Fleet Pride, Rush Trucks, AutoZone, Peach State, Cummins, Robert Truck, and Thermo King. 3 of those vendors are piggybacking off of statewide contracts, and 5 of these vendors do not have any contracts. So there's no contracts. They're not piggybacking off of any state or any kind of government contracts, and they're also not following, it's on the DJE policy states all of this, or they have to, according to the dollar amount of the purchase, that would determine how many written quotes that the department has to present in order to use that vendor. And 5 of those vendors that we looked at, they're not following any of those guidelines. So the blanket purchase orders that we did look at was from fiscal year 21 to 24, ranging from $1,844.82 to $50,000. The Transportation and Purchasing Department could not explain how this dollar amount for each blanket order was determined. Okay, and so the account line used to track the expenditures for the inventory transportation parts is also used for other items within the Transportation Department, as we discussed earlier. So we were unable to determine the exact amount spent on just inventory transportation parts. We did review the amounts for the blanket purchase orders during this scope, and there is a correction to the report. We noted that in fiscal year 24 that it was $1,060,000. It should be $795,000 for the blanket purchase orders for fiscal year 24. So that is a correction to the report. For fiscal year '23, it was $526,845. For fiscal year '22 was $295,000, and for fiscal year '21, for the blanket purchase orders, it was $330,000. And these are the amounts we created based on the 8 vendors we did look at. And weak financial monitoring controls can lead to overspending and financial mismanagement. The recommendation that we gave, so we have 3 observations, and 2 of the recommendations was directed to the operations department, but this recommendation was directed to the finance department. We recommended to conduct a review of all transportation part vendors the transportation department uses to ensure a formal contract is in place, to review the blanket purchase orders to determine if the process is the best practice for the department, and establish procedures to support these processes, and develop accounting controls that allow for monitoring of costs and inventory. And the management response for this, this came from the finance department. They said they will work with their operation team to reestablish purchasing and purchase order protocols once transportation procedures are updated. The person responsible for this would be the senior purchasing director and the team, and the timeline they gave us was March 2025.
We'll just start at the end.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So this just tells me that I'm glad that we have new leadership over there.
Yes.
Because those of us who are on the board, we realized there was some issues, but now that we're getting into some of these numbers, we see how bad those issues really were. You have a lot of heavy lifting to do, and I know you've already done a lot of heavy lifting since you've been here in September, and I do appreciate that. I also think that it is disheartening to hear that of these, there was 5 that we didn't have contracts with. And I'm wondering how we even got them money. How did we get that connection, and kind of looking into that? Because this is, as it says here in the report, it says weak financial controls can also create opportunities for fraud. And that's what I'm worried about with taxpayers' money, with public funds. Not saying there is, but there's that opportunity. So I am looking forward to seeing what the new leadership with the new COO is able to do in order to make sure that this does not happen, and that we actually know where our money's going, how much is going there, and that we actually have proper contracts, and whether it's a contract or even an MOU or something on paper stating with the company that we're giving money to that is the public's money. So not really a question, but more of a comment.
Is there any explanation as to why there was such a dramatic increase in blanket PL usage? No? Okay.
All right, so I guess my question kind of piggybacks off that. It seems like there should be a process for payments to be made to a vendor who does not have a contract with the district? Like I guess I'm trying to figure out how do payments even get made to someone who does not.
They may have had a contract with us outside the scope of our audit many, many years ago, and it's just a new contract has not been put in place to ensure the pricing.
Okay,
That was one of the 5 that doesn't have an active contract?
So I can't tell you specifics about this. I can tell you that historically, there may have been like a statewide contract that we were utilizing that maybe fell off of the statewide contract list, and maybe.
so in other words, it was still in the system, if you will,
It
right?
was still in the system, so AP could still pay it. The procurement team perhaps didn't realize it wasn't out on the list, so there
And
might.
I'm assuming that's going to be one of the written procedures that says, check the updated list for vendors?
I will allow finance to confirm that.
When we say we didn't have contracts at the time, the Transportation Department had what was called purchasing agent authority, where instead of them having to come through the purchasing department to do all of their purchases, this was set up when transportation was brought in-house. And it was found at that time that our fleet was in pretty bad shape. So there was a lot of maintenance going on and to get the buses up and running. So instead of them having to go through the purchasing department constantly with purchase orders, they were given what was called a purchasing, I think it's called a purchasing agent authority, where they had up to the $50,000 limit that they could go out to vendors, ask for quotes, and for each one, when they needed to buy something, they would get at least 2 quotes from different vendors, and that would be their documentation and their authority to make a purchase. So all of that was being done in-house in the Transportation Department. Some of the vendors, like you said, like the Yanceys, and some of them, the majority of them had contracts at the beginning when transportation was brought back in. But with them doing the buying out there, they were contacting constantly the vendors. Our purchasing department would not know the vendors in some instances that they were using. And you are correct, they were able to make the purchases because those vendors were in our system. So I want to make sure that you understand that there were procedures out there that they had, and the procedures were all established to ensure that they were not gridlocked with having to go through purchasing when it came time to repair the buses, to get the buses back out on the road. So to expedite the process for them, they got the buying agent authority to where their people out there at that time could get the quotes themselves to establish the
Do they still
purchase
have
orders.
that, do they still have that authority
They do
as it
have that
stands now?
They do have that, and that's one of the things that we're talking about, trying to make the changes. Since we do now have a newer fleet, and things are not, I don't think that they're of the state where they were like emergencies like they were maybe several years ago. But there has been a lot of turnover in management there. So as they've been coming on, I think they've been following the protocol that was established when they walked in the door. And as they said as Shauna said, when she started this presentation, Finance asked for this review because we saw that there were some holes in the process, and
Yes.
we didn't have the authority to go in there and say, okay, transportation, you need to do this. Let's ask internal audit to go in, look at what's going on so we can fix it.
Thank you, and thank you for asking for the audit.
Yeah, thank you for asking for the audit.
Mr. Moss, Ms. Watts?
I can't. I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, I do think I understand the need for expediency, but the taxpayer shouldn't have to choose between accurate financial controls and effective operations. That's a false choice. So let's just put it on the list. Number 3.
Okay, so number 3 is inventory controls. Significant deficiency exists in the inventory control practice, including unauthorized modifications to inventory counts and pricing and access protocols to the inventory room. We did a control test, and we used the Transportation Inventory Parts Report. We sampled 121 items, and 45 of the 121 items did not match our physical count. In addition, the report did have 3,011 items, and 1,251 items had incorrect pricing. So on the inventory report, on the average pricing for those items, it either listed like a $0 amount or just $1. So the pricing wasn't updated on that inventory hand report. After presenting the findings of the incorrect, the items that didn't match our physical count to management after we presented those findings. We observed some of the items being changed in the system without physical verification of those items. There's also no established controls over who can monitor inventory counts or change inventory counts within. They use a system called Fleet Vision, so there's no controls of who can change the modification of the items on hand. During our visit, we also noticed staff members freely moving within the inventory parts area. When we interviewed management about these issues, there were inconsistent responses regarding who have access to the inventory room. So our recommendations was to the operations, Office of Operations. They were to establish detailed procedures to access both electronic and physical inventory modifications, and establish reoccurring inventory audits to ensure compliance and financial accountability. The management response had 3 parts to their response. The first one was how to improve the inventory tracking system. They will evaluate technology solutions to automate inventory tracking, allowing for real-time updates on better accuracy record keeping. The person responsible for this will be the Executive Director of Transportation, and the timeline they gave us was May of 2025. The second was to conduct regular physical inventory counts. They would establish a schedule for biannual physical inventory counts with detailed documentation to reconcile the inventory records. The person responsible for this will be the Operation Inventory Manager. And the first count will be done by February 2025. Okay, and the last response they gave us was how to strengthen financial controls. They're going to partner with the Chief Financial Officer to review and implement financial controls to inventory purchases and the usage. The person responsible for this will be the Chief Operation Officer, and this will be completed by April of 2025.
Very quickly, when did you, just remind me, when did you physically do this audit?
In October,
Okay. So in
the first
October,
week, the second week in October, that's when I went out.
okay, so in October, we became aware we did not have control of our physical inventory, and we're going to conduct the first count by February.
That is correct. So, and the reason for that is I want to first explore, we purchased a electronic system, and so I want to figure out what is this electronic system that we do. I want to train the staff. I want to put the appropriate security measures in place, working with campus police to say, how do we create a physical barrier? Maybe that's a door, maybe that's a lock. So it takes a little bit of time, including that we've got some winter breaks coming up between now and then. So that's why it's February.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So, Ms. Davidson, I know you've got some, as I said before, a lot of heavy lifting. And this is not towards you because you are new. The fact that, like I said, we've had transportation in-house for 8 years, and I've done a tour of maintenance down there, and it is, the inventory is wide open. For those of you who have not been down there, it's basically anybody can walk in there, get what they need, and walk out. So I'm glad to hear that you're going to have some barriers and some sort of control that way, and the use of technology to make sure that we know what's coming in, what's going out, where it's going. I mean, I don't know how it works, but I do know that in some other areas that have like fleets, they know exactly which vehicle those parts are going to. So they can monitor, is it a parts issue? Is it a vehicle issue? Is it a driver issue? Is it, I mean, because if you have one bus that are constantly going through tires, is it the route? Is it the driver? Is it, what is it? So I just want to say, welcome to the great state of Chatham.
Thank you, thank you. And I will highlight that as part of our implementation of our inventory system, we're going to look for barcoding, because right now the staff have to manually key in like a 16-digit code. That allows for human error, and so if we can take a tool that will make it more efficient and eliminate, yes, right? So how can we make it more accurate, more efficient, more effective, and more user-friendly so that we can eliminate our errors? But I'm sure this tool that we already purchased has the ability to just turn it on. We just have to figure out how do we turn it on and then train the team.
This is just a recommendation in general, but I would strongly encourage you hire a full-time comptroller for this department, somebody that sits there every day and looks at this stuff.
Mr. Moss? Okay. Again, I feel like a bit of a broken record. We're not trying to pound the rock here, but, this is another thing we've got to address. This is millions of dollars, and so we need to find them. And my personal opinion is February. If we've got an uncontrolled inventory area, I'm not so interested in hearing about winter breaks. I'm more interested in how we're going to fix it. So that'll be my one comment. So seeing no other questions, is there a motion to adopt the report?
So moved, or second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the inventory audit of transportation parts. All in favor?
Aye.
The report is adopted. This concludes the formal portions, and then Leah has a couple of informational items.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Great job.
Yes, great job.
For the sake of time, in respect of everybody's time, I will be brief. So we've updated the internal audit dashboard. The key thing I want to point out here is before we were piecemealing a bunch of different reports to you, what we've now done is we have brought it all together in what we call the internal audit dashboard. The first page will show you the progress of where we are with these audits along the way. I know some of these are, not started or overdue, and the key thing about that is part of it was the hurricane kind of slowed us down because of we wanted to give outside of that 1 week, but we had another week where we just wanted to be respectful to the school sites and to the sites and not go into their environment while they get back into a normalcy after that event. We also add in, remember, our other services, and I'll talk about that in a second. The other services, remember, we break down is more than just audits. We are consultants to the district. We serve in other district supporting activities in support of the policy maintenance piece as well as the hotline. So that is what we are referring to here. We won't go in detail this time for time purposes. And also within this dashboard, we're adding in the progress monitoring report. And this is the key monthly report out that we provide to you to give you an update on the status of percentage completion this year when it comes to management completing the recommendations. So that is the grid that you will see, and this is as of November 21st, so as of today. So if we had any changes as of yesterday, we would let you know. There is no changes at this point. So at this point, the percentage completion is still at the 18% as the previous, and we will have some future report outs, and as you can see, we have, if you see the word date, that means there was a date change from the original, but starting with the second area of the audits of the student support services, there is a date there. That means that's when we're reporting out. So in the June meeting, that's when we'll report out on that. Same thing as the other dates. Any questions on that?
I just got a quick comment. These graphs and pie charts, for those of us who are visual, it's very useful.
Okay.
I like it, but I'm a visual person. Not everybody is.
Yeah.
So it just being able to see it in a different manner, I think that also will show more transparency to the public. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, and as we also wanted to highlight, part of our requirements for a Yellow Book standard audit shop is that we do every 2 years 80 hours worth of CPE, 24 of that being in government. And so we just also, because we've requested more money to have more opportunity for professional development a few years ago, and I appreciate you all allowing us to have that money as well as having the district to support us as well. We do a monthly report out for you all to let you know what type of trainings we are going to. And if you've paid attention for the past couple of months, we are doing more AI because AI is evolving technology we cannot ignore. And so when we present the completed audit manual, because I'm making some updates to that as I'm working through it with also Dr. Watts operationally, we will bring that to you, and you will see a component of the AI in there as the expectation of how auditors should use the AI, how we can use them in our audit report, so we are transparent in that area. All right, this last section, I wanted to highlight the audits and non-audits, and the key thing for that is in the last time we had brought our time that we spent, somebody said, well, we need you more audits. Well, there's a benefit of both. So audits are more transparent. They do become public, but it's more of a systematic overall of those controls, or at the request, we can have a full-blown audit. But also management can do non-audits. And what are those? Those are services that do not involve the formal auditing process. Like, for instance, if somebody wanted to ask us to do a cost analysis of, athletic equipment, that would be a non-audit service. And that's us collecting information, analyzing the data, and providing any recommendations of what may exist. Or we might not make any recommendations at all. It could be just that. Or another non-audit service is they're building a new standard operation procedure, and can you review this to make sure, that we have the preventive controls in place, any detective controls in place, and any other ways we can mitigate risks, okay? So I just wanted to put that in there as just an infographic, since you like pictures, Michael. Some infographics so you can understand what that is and the benefit for that for district management as well.
Thank you very much, Leah. And very quickly, this is our last meeting of calendar year 2024. So I would like to thank Michael Johnson and Josh Keller and Richard Saunders for their service. They will be leaving us, but thank you for all of your efforts and all of your support for this team that is responsible for educating our children. So thank you. And with that, I will entertain
Well,
a motion.
we need to
Oh,
talk about the proposed dates for next year to make
Oh.
sure
Oh, yeah.
everybody's in agreement.
Sorry. It is the end of the year, so we have new dates.
Yeah.
They're in the packet. I think we only really slid one because you will be loaning this facility to our brothers and sisters in the city.
Yes.
For certain events. as
And that
they-
we shifted to six times a year instead of every other month to support the timing of us in schools, so we're not pressuring that, getting response from management as they're doing startups within the school system, as well as we never have done one in May for graduation purposes for board members and so forth.
So those dates are in your packet. Please, Leah will, of course, send out invites, but thank you again, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.